Anyway, but something tells me that spring is right around the corner. And because spring is right around the corner, what that also means is it's time to begin to think about professional conference travel. Because springtime is when you start thinking about, okay, where's my research going? What kind of things do I have to share at next year's conferences? Because some of them have some pretty long lead times, and you have to be thinking quite a bit ahead of where you'd like to be and when you'd like to do that. So I thought, since many of you are in the process of preparing conference proposals, just right now at the same time you're preparing your articles for publication, excuse me, I'm fighting a bit of a cough here. The same time you're preparing articles for publication, thought it'd be a very good time for us to talk about how to participate in professional conferences. Now, I know some of you have a lot of experience going to conferences, and what I'm hoping here in our discussion tonight, that when you see things that, or makes you think of things that people should know about, secrets that you know, hacks you should make, that this is the perfect time to share those. And I'll share some of mine with you. But the reality is that how to actually do a conference really well is not written down anywhere. It's really folk knowledge. It's knowledge of experts that share it in dark corners with mirrors, or standing in foggy in the fog out on some deck somewhere close to the ocean on the pier, secretly sharing how to hack a conference. But tonight I'm going to try to tell you everything I know about how to hack a conference and get your ideas as well. So with that, what goes on at conferences? What kind of things can you see at conferences? Well, one of the main things that you see at conferences are keynote talks, or sometimes they're called plenary talks. Sometimes they're called prize award-winning talks. And these are talks by real leaders of the field, or people you really want to hear from. Maybe they're very famous book authors, maybe they're very famous scientists, that they've either the organization has either given them a lot of money to come give a talk, or they've given them an award and say, in order for you to come get this $1,000 award, or this $5,000 Life Achievement Award, or this $10,000 Mentoring Award, you actually have to come to the conference and give a talk. So that's how they get these high-profile folks. Again, they may be authors, political figures, senior scientists, and they're always very well attended. Usually there's nothing else going on at the conference at the same time, so everybody from the conference is usually there. It's in a giant ballroom, can have 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 people in them. Those are called the plenary talks, and that's a pretty important part of many conferences. Now, that's not the only thing going on at a conference. At a big conference, you may only have 4 of these sorts of talks. But what is, most of the time, time at the conference is given to what are called contributed talks. These are much, much shorter talks. And these talks are not given to rooms of thousands of people. These are talks given to rooms that may have 1,000 chairs but have far fewer people in it. Here's a picture of me giving a talk at the American Geophysical Union. I think that Katie may have been in the audience for this one because I told her that she had to go. But in general, you're standing at a podium a long way away from the audience using a remote control to run a screen that you can't actually see to a group of people who are only really there because they also are giving talks in that session and they were too embarrassed to walk in late and they don't want to walk out of yours. So there can be contributed talks, or papers they're called, are kind of the mainstay of the conference. And in general, these things are not very well attended. Sometimes they're greatly attended, but not always. Now, in addition to talks, you find poster sessions. These are really science fairs for adults. And whether your conference you're going to has more papers being presented or more posters really depends on the nature of the conference. Some conferences, the poster session is where it's at. Everything goes on at the poster session. Everybody meets at the poster session. There's beer served at the poster session. There's food at the poster session. On some conferences, there's almost no poster session whatsoever, and everything's done in the form of contributed talks and contributed papers. Here's a picture from AGU, the American Geophysical Union. The American Geophysical Union has about 20,000 people show up at its conference. It's a very, very large conference. There are about 12,000 posters being presented at this conference in a giant, giant warehouse. All at the same time. Posters generally go up all day long, And so you get there at 7:30 in the morning, and you put up your poster, and you're supposed to stand next to your poster until 6:30 that night and then take it down. Well, no, that's not really true. In general, some conferences will assign times. They'll say, be at your poster from 10 in the morning till 11:30 in the morning, or be at your poster from 4 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Or sometimes they won't assign them times at all, but what people will do is they'll self-assign times. So right in the middle of that screen, there's a sign that says poster number 833, and beneath that is a piece of paper, and on that piece of paper says, I will be here at my poster from blank to blank, and people write down what times they're going to be there. For conferences like the American Geophysical Union, for American Astronomical Society, this is where all the socializing happens. People just go and hang out in the poster sessions. They may not be looking at your poster, but that's a place where people get together and chat. You may recognize in this picture on the far left is Sharon Slay from Purdue. In the center of the picture is Jill Rourke from the University of Minnesota. I'm the guy standing there who hadn't done my hair yet. It's hard to tell who else is in the picture. Anyway, so poster sessions are sometimes a pretty big deal. And I know many of you are doing poster sessions coming up pretty soon. I think Cheyenne and Katie are doing posters at the upcoming Astronomical Society of the Pacific. I believe maybe Sean Latch is as well. Coming up at the AAS meeting, Sharon Slay is running a session, and I believe that Debbie French is going to be doing a poster there. So lots of poster sessions are really, really good stuff. It's where a lot of socializing happens. Something else you may notice about the poster session are these brown envelopes hanging on the wall. These brown envelopes hanging on the wall are manila folders, or manila envelope, or business envelopes where people have made photocopies of their poster on 8.5 by 11 and have them there for people to take. Sometimes people also put business cards around the bottom. One thing that I did in my poster is the green one, number 833. You may see little Post-it notes at the bottom, and it's really hard to see on my screen. But what I did is I had Post-it notes sitting there and told people to write notes about the poster and stick them on the poster right there. That way they kind of a way for them to graffiti my poster, if you will. So those are the three really big things that happen at conferences. The plenary invited talks that everybody goes to, the contributed papers that the speakers go to, and they can be anywhere from 6 minutes, which is very, very short, to 30 minutes, which is relatively long. And then there are poster sessions. And all three of these things are very different ways of producing talks and for sharing science that's going on at these. Now, that's not all that happens at these conferences. Another thing that happens at conferences are panel discussions, and you probably saw this in your reading. Panel discussions are where you get a series of experts together to present their views and argue with each other, specifically talk to one another and let the rest of the audience listen in about what's going on. Now, panel discussions in and of themselves, from my nickels, are just okay things to listen to. What's really important is if you're able to be the organizer of one of those panel discussions. What happens is you get to interact with each of these speakers, and you get together with them early, maybe meet an hour and a half before the session and have coffee with them, or if everybody's going to be able to be there the night before, what you do is you have a panel dinner where everybody gets together at a restaurant. You get to pick the restaurant. Everybody pays their own way, and you get to spend an hour and a half eating, drinking, and having conversation with really important people in the field who are experts at the kind of things you want to pay attention to. So panel discussions are really, really neat things to put together because it allows you to get to know people you wouldn't otherwise get to know. Now, I didn't mention back here at the poster sessions that poster sessions are often places where you're going to run into somebody famous, somebody who's walking around. Maybe it's someone who's written a paper that you really like. Maybe it's somebody who's giving a talk that you're really interested in. Maybe it's somebody you think that might be really good on a committee of yours. And these are places you can often find them wandering around and not talking to anybody. You should feel completely free to walk up to these folks and talk to them. You can usually tell in the first 30 seconds if they're a conversationalist or not. What I wouldn't recommend doing, though, is going up and interrupting a conversation. It's usually best to try to catch them in between conversations, which can be a bit of a trick to doing that. Now, of course, the reading that you're doing, you've given some advice about what kind of things to say and how to start the conversation, where to go with that. But if you're looking to meet people who are just wandering around that you really want to meet, and you really do want to meet these people, poster sessions are definitely the way to do that. But if you really want to get to know folks, panel discussions, organizing a panel discussion is a really good way to do it. Organizing, also hanging around at a panel discussion is also a good way to get to talk to folks, because there may be 3, 4, 5 people on a panel, and at the end of the session you may find 3 of them standing there arguing with one another, and 1 or 2 just standing by the side not doing anything. It's another great place to get a chance to talk to somebody important if they're not engaged in conversation with somebody else. Meetings are really for networking. They're really, really for meeting people. That's why they're called a meeting. And so I encourage you to take advantage of as many of these things as you possibly can. Now, in addition to invited talks and plenary talks, in addition to contributed talks, papers, in addition to poster sessions and all of the discussions you can get involved in around poster sessions, there are also often half-day workshops or full-day or once in a while even 2-day workshops. In general, these are workshops that happen before conferences happen. Yep, that's Katie and Stephanie in that one. I have no idea where this particular workshop is. Let's see here. That's also AGU. Okay, cool. You know, it was Cal Academy was this one. And we tend to offer a lot of workshops as the CAPERTeam, because this is a good place to get to spend a lot of time sharing the research ideas you have, sharing the instructional strategies you've been working on, and getting to know people pretty well. Our book publishers really, really like pre-conference workshops, because if people like you and they get to know your materials, they're very likely to buy your curriculum materials that you're selling. So often these are run by book publishers, by computer programming software people, even by hardware telescope people will often be running workshops. And sometimes when you go to these workshops, you get free stuff. Or often you get free stuff, and so that's usually a good reason to go. Usually you get free coffee, sometimes you can get free breakfast and free lunch. So workshops are often a good thing. They usually do charge a little extra to go to these workshops, usually to cover the cost of coffee and registration, and it's going to cost an extra night or 2 of hotel rooms. But again, a half-day, full-day conference is a really good way to get in-depth study of a particular kind of thing. In our case, it's usually teaching strategies. Now, in addition to the plenary talks and the contributed talks and the poster sessions and the pre-conference workshops, one of the things you're going to find are really, really annoying, very long registration lines. Why a bunch of scientists who pride themselves on speed and efficiency can't figure out how to do fast registration, I just don't know. Some places, you're able to get your registration information before you get there or download it online and can avoid these long lines. If there's any way at all you can avoid these long lines, you need to figure out a way to do it. Every conference is a little bit different in how you pull that off. Sometimes if you go really early or really late, or sometimes in the middle of the day, or sometimes if you wait half a day before going and registering, all those things can help. But when you get to the front of this very, very long line, they give you a whole bunch of promotional materials you really aren't interested in and really, really don't need. Usually they give you a really big, heavy meeting booklet. At NSTA, for instance, you get 4 books, 1 for each day. Each one's about 3 inches thick. At AGU, you get 2 books, a program book of what's going on and a book of abstracts. Recently, some conferences have started figuring out how to do apps, iPad apps, iPhone apps, Android apps, and these are really, really cool things because you get all your information, you can go through it and figure out exactly what you'd like to do, and schedule things out, and then it's all right there at your tip tops of your fingers. So those are very handy things to have, and they're usually available before the conference starts. So as soon as you get your big book or get your app, the first thing you want to do is spend some time going through it. And you want to pick throughout the day 2 things that you'd like to do. You always want to have a first choice and a second choice. And the reason you want to have a first choice and a second choice is sometimes you'll go to the room of your first choice and it'll be completely full and you just can't get in, so you need to go on to your second choice. Sometimes what you'll want to do is you'll want to go into you're going to the first choice, and it really, really is terrible. That speaker is just awful. And so then you want to be able to go to your second choice. But realize that sometimes you won't get to your first choice or get to your second choice because you're busy meeting with somebody out in the hallway that you've always been wanting to meet, or you've been spent all meeting trying to figure out how to meet. And so you're just going to miss half the stuff that you want to do. It's just the way it is. Some things are videotaped or audio taped or digitally recorded and put on the websites. Some are not. But again, you want to be sure you do a lot of pre-planning, because if you're sitting there at 8 o'clock trying to figure out what you want to do at 8:30, you're going to be in a real mess. So take some time, even if it's just a half hour away, and to get that stuff figured out. Some sessions you can pre-register for, as Jana pointed out, like at NSTA, which I don't know exactly how well that works, but that sounds like a really good idea. NSTA really struggles with these ideas of having rooms that are either completely empty or completely full. Now, that's one of the things you get when you register, but that's not what's really important. What's really, really important when you register is your name badge. The name badge serves as a bunch of really, really important functions. One function it serves is it has your name on it. And if you wear it and you're walking around, then people can talk to you and call you by name and even remember your name. Your name badge probably also has a barcode on it. And that barcode, whether it's a barcode or a QR code, is very useful, because when you go to the exhibit hall, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, vendors can zap your barcode, and they have you on record, and they can send you free stuff, put you on their mailing list, which of course you can delete, but often you can get free stuff. Now, Jana, you just worked in exhibit hall. I don't know if you have your audio on or not. Did you guys use barcodes, and what did you use barcodes for? Well, you got to type that stuff in there. So your name, your location is on there. And then underneath your name tag at some conferences, you have a bunch of crazy stickers on there. These stickers are very, very important, because these stickers, sometimes you get them at the registration desk, and sometimes you get them as you're wandering around the conference. These are great conversation starters. If you see someone you'd like to talk to and you have no idea how to start the conversation, ask them about one of their badges, the stickers. Even if you know what it means, ask them about it, because people tend to wear these things pretty proudly. This particular one has a first-timer, which means the first time you've been to that conference, and people will come up to you and say, hey, it's your first time. Would you like some advice? Or if you're an award recipient, people use that as an opportunity to come up and talk to you about your award. This isn't completely unlike gangs that wear colors to identify who they're a member of. Yeah, I know, I didn't mean to make you giggle there, but it's a great conversation piece. And so I recommend that you get as many of these stickers as you can and use them as a chance to talk to people. Because the reality is, most of you are going to be going to science conferences. And scientists are not known as being the world's best conversationalists. Sometimes you have to help them along. Reminds me of the old Steve Martin bit. He was doing a movie called, oh, geez, my brain is dying here at the end of the day. It was about living in Los Angeles. And there's a particular place where he's sitting at a dinner party. He's sitting next to this attractive blonde woman, and the person next to her says, hey, did you know that Susan is taking courses in conversation? Steve Martin goes, really? That's fantastic. And the blonde lady who's taking the courses in conversation goes, yes. So, you remember you're dealing with scientists. And so scientists often aren't very good at conversations. So these things will help you help them to have a conversation. So I recommend that you take your name badge very, very seriously. In addition, your name badge will get you into receptions. There are a gazillion receptions that go on at these conferences, and they are characterized by two things. Number one, characterized by expensive drinks, I mean like $8, $10, $12 for a beer, and free food. And let me put the emphasis on free food. Now notice there's a gazillion people there. they eat that free food really, really fast. So if the reception starts at 6, don't show up fashionably late at 6:20. Show up there at 5:55, grab your free food, and then head over to the bar to get yourself an expensive drink. Because there's another reception starting at 7:30, and you want to be sure you're ready for that reception at 7:25. Because again, the free food at these things don't last very long, but you can reception hop to reception hop to reception hop. You don't want to have your backpack with you. You don't want to have your coat with you or your briefcase. You may not even want to have your purse with you because these things are tight, they're crowded, you don't want to carry anything. They're typically noisy, but everybody's there, and it's a great place to meet people. And if you tell people you're a graduate student, sometimes people will buy you drinks. I've been telling people I've been a graduate student for years just to get free drinks. No, not the bartenders. The bartenders won't give you free drinks, but often whoever you're talking to will, because they'll take pity on a relatively poor graduate student. Now, one of the things that I should point out here is the way you purchase drinks is very strange. In general, you do not give the bartender money. In general, there's somebody standing next to the bartender that you give money to, and that person then gives you a ticket, and you go stand in the bar line and buy the drinks from them. Why this is true, I just don't know. But you want to be alert on where these receptions are and when they're going to be, because they often aren't advertised. So put on your eavesdropping ears when you hear people say, hey, I can't meet you because I got to go to such and such a reception. That's definitely where you want to be at that reception. So don't miss the receptions because that's free food. Now, exhibit halls. In addition to plenary talks, invited talks, poster sessions, panel discussions, and standing in long lines, and going to receptions, there is the exhibit halls. The exhibit halls, I got to tell you, where I spend most of my time. These are where you get to meet famous people, you get to talk to book authors. Many of these booths have free stuff. Maybe it's free books, maybe it's free pencils, maybe it's free mouse pads, maybe it's, who knows what kinds of things are there. Yep, this must be AGU. You know what, I just realized these pictures I found, these are courtesy of Inga Heyer, because we don't see Inga at all in these pictures, but we do see Katie hitting them a lot. So these are Inga Heyer pictures. So thank you, Inga, for providing these pictures. These exhibit halls at some conferences are very small and take you 5 minutes to walk through, or some places like NSTA, they're incredibly large and they will take you literally 8 hours to get through. This is at AGU. AGU not only has commercial vendors, they have a lot of scientific equipment vendors. And so it's often really fun to go through and see the telescopes, see the compasses, see the geodesic domes, all kinds of crazy things that you have. So in the middle of this picture here, standing next to me on my left, is David. Where did my head go? He's probably even here. From the University of Nebraska. Dave Goslin, director of the Natural Resources Lab there, fantastic educator. And as you can see, I'm standing here waiting to talk to him, but he's already busy talking to somebody else. So you can go round and round these things because the vendors are there and different vendors show up at different times. It's a really, really good place to spend quite a bit of time. And one of the reasons it's a really good place to spend a lot of time is often they have free food, free coffee, and at places like AGU, they will often have free beer. And I don't mean cheap beer, I mean really good beer. And you can get free books, free textbooks. If you go to a publisher who offers books for courses you teach, you can say, hey, I'm in the market for a new book. I'm teaching this new class next fall. I've never taught this geology class, never taught this astronomy class, never taught this chemistry class. I'm trying to decide what book to use. They'll often, if you write their names, you let them write your name down and your email address, they'll give you free copies of books. Now, for those of you who've been in the K-12 world, conferences do not give away free books to teachers very often. In higher ed world, in college, university, science world, free books flow like water. So you can often get free books there. The authors are often standing there during beer time, so you can go by, talk to them. You can even have them sign your books for you, which is really kind of a fun thing to do. So this was an author signing at AGU. Stephanie and I were doing about a series of books that we've done on doing education research. Really, really good time. So don't miss the exhibit halls, but find out by talking to people at what time the free beer is there. You don't want to be there at 1 o'clock and get yourself all worn out if the free beer isn't there until 5 o'clock. NSTA is famous for having an ice cream social on a particular day. So you want to be sure you just talk to people, ask the vendors often, people that are there, what's going on. They're usually bored to tears, particularly on the last day. Finally, on the last day of the conference, the last hour of the conference, they're not allowed to pack up anything, but they start looking at all the books and all the materials that they have there and are saying, you know what, I really don't want to ship all this stuff home. And many vendors will give you stuff. They'll give you aquariums. They will give you posters. They will give you books. They will give you butterflies. They will give you hermit crabs. They will often give a lot of stuff away during the last hour. So if you have something that you want, that you'd like to have, but you don't want to pay for it, you think it's really big and they aren't going to want to ship it back, you'll find that giveaways, the people just start giving stuff away during the last hour of this. So exhibit halls, really, really important. And, you know, to be completely honest, part of going to conferences also has to do with where you're going. The AGU conference, where many of these pictures were taken, is from San Francisco. It happens in December and happens right before Christmas, so everything's completely decorated for Christmas. This is Union Square in San Francisco. On the right-hand side, you can see pictures. You see all the windows of Macy's, all which have giant wreaths in them. They also have puppies in the windows from the Humane Societies. And you get to go hang out with friends that you've known for a long time. If your family gets to go with you, you get to go to really fantastic, beautiful places and do science at the same time. And so you can't ignore this idea of traveling. I think that's a pretty important thing to remember, that traveling does happen. And you should take in some of the sites. You don't want to skip the meeting to do those things. But what I would recommend is that you go, if you want to go explore a city, if the city you haven't been in before, to go early to do your exploration. Because by the end of the conference, you're so tired you're not going to want to go to the zoo or go see anything. So, fantastic cities. So given these perspectives here, there's some questions that you need to ask and be able to answer for yourself. And we're going to do these in a minute here. They have to do with which conferences you're going to, what you're going to do while you're there, and how you're going to pay for this thing. But let me pause here and say we've talked about invited talks, contributed talks, poster sessions, exhibit halls, panel discussions, registration lines, name badges, program booklets, program apps, and how to find free beer and how to talk to people. Let me pause here for a moment, and what questions do you have, or what insights do you have based on experiences you've had at conferences that you think other people need to know about? Katie, what do you need to do to get in a lot of pictures?
Hang out with your advisor.
Heather suggests staying at the conference hotel. Don't save money by staying farther away. Heather, tell me what you're thinking about that. You have audio.
All right. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Mama. Oh, okay. So when I have gone to conferences, for example, NSTA in San Francisco. Leah, go. Okay, when I went to NSTA in San Francisco, I saved some money by staying not at the conference headquarter hotel, but 3 or 4 blocks away. If you want to go to some of the late night sessions where you get cool free giveaways, it's not always comfortable walking back to your hotel room at midnight with homeless people yelling at you. That was my experience.
San Francisco is famous for the number of homeless people it has and the creative ways that they have to chat with you and make you feel uncomfortable.
And I guess the other thing I would add to that is that after walking around the conference all day, You don't want to walk a half a mile back to your hotel room, up a hill or whatever, especially if you're dressed up at all.
NSTA is particularly bad about this because they're spread out.
This is Yana.
It's a large conference. They're spread out by
And,
so many different
can you guys hear me?
hotels. Yes, Yana, we can hear you.
I agree about staying at the conference hotel because that can be very convenient. And I just wanted to make a point about the comment I just typed in about the contacts that you can make. When you collect people's cards, you can write some quick notes or something on the back of the card to remind yourself what you spoke about or what their work was and so forth. And I always take the context back, and it may not seem that it's something important right away, but a lot of times, 6 months or a year down the road, I'll find myself digging back through some of those business cards because there's a new project that came up or something I think I could collaborate with one of those contacts on, and that's always nice to be able to revisit that. And even just sending follow-up, like a follow-up email if you had a particularly engaging conversation or there's something that you were really interested in.
I think that's a really good point, Yana. Some way to take notes and keep track of all this stuff is really important. Keep track of the people that you've met. Because in many cases, you're going to be talking to people who eventually or may at that time be hiring. There are often job centers at these conferences. People do interviews at conferences. Sometimes you're looking for, you'd like to serve on a particular committee for a conference, and you need to get to know who those people are. And so by meeting them in the hallway, you can get your name known a bit or asked to be a part of these different things that are going on. So again, having business cards and having some skill at getting them out is a really important part of this. So let's talk about some of these issues here for a minute. So,
and going back, I was just going to say, going back to those QR codes. I'm sorry I couldn't get my audio to work before, but going back to those QR codes, that we have these scanners, and so we would scan the QR codes, and it collects all of your information, who you are, where you teach, and so forth, whatever is pertinent. And then if you're talking to some vendors, they can put in specific notes, like if you're interested in a particular product or you need to get in touch with someone, back at the office or something, and that can be helpful too, because then you can be certain that you'll make that contact later on. So we've already come back and gone through all of our scanning information, and then we can go back and contact the people we said we would contact. So that's kind of nice. And as far as the free stuff, don't forget you can always ship a box of goodies back to yourself so you don't have to carry it on the plane.
That's really good advice. A piece of advice I've often heard people say is be sure you take an extra suitcase. That used to be cheaper than it is nowadays.
I don't know if it's really that's true, but the thing with the suitcase is that you still have to carry it, whereas if you get a cardboard box at a UPS store, you can throw everything in and it'll be delivered to your doorstep.
That's a fantastic idea. Sometimes when I go to NSTA in particular, I'll go to the UPS store and I'll buy a big poster tube because I know I'm going to get lots and lots of posters while I'm at the meeting, and if I want to get them home safely, I need to have a waiting giant poster tube. Mark, what are you saying about people being open to talk to you?
I was just going to say that it's almost, well, to me it's been mostly pleasantly surprising how often people are really happy to share about their work and their research. And, I guess it's just analogous to most people like to talk about what they're passionate about. And if you kind of just approach someone and ask them about those things, what I also said was it seems like they're often very willing, like you had said, to give out cards and give out contact info and collaborate down the line. And Jana mentioned that as well. So I find that people are much more happy to do that at conferences than I've often expected.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. If you can screw up the courage to go say hi to somebody, that in general they'll be happy to keep talking to you. Often it's about your name tag, but there's an old joke about introverted scientists versus extroverted scientists, and you know what the difference is. An extroverted scientist looks at your shoes while he's talking to you. That's the old joke. All right, Ken, that's a good idea. Taking a roller case into the vendors area, that's a really good idea.
Can I add something sort of related?
Go for it.
Well, your audio is related. I don't know how much this applies to scientific conferences, but I went to a conference, it was the national, I can't remember, big space conference. Lots of Air Force folks, space industry professionals. I'd never been to it before. I'm representing a university, but I didn't realize that everybody there was going to be dressed in suits. And I didn't arrive with a suit. And after the first morning session, I was like, okay, I definitely have to dress here. So I took the afternoon and went to Mason and got myself a suit. And next morning session, I actually was very awesome.
So we should spend a little bit of time talking about which conferences to go to. Now, there are a gazillion conferences available to choose from, and there's a bunch of them. If you just do a Google search for science education conferences or chemistry education conferences or K-12 teacher conferences or astronomy conferences, they'll come right up. There's no problem to find these things. There's a number of them listed on this particular page at Western Michigan. But it does take some planning to figure out. And in terms of trying to figure out, for me, which conferences I go to, I do a lot of conference travel, and I really try to say no as much as I can. In general, for me, I go to a conference and I've been invited to speak there, but it depends on who's paying for it. Sometimes my university pays for it. Sometimes I pay for it out of my pocket. Sometimes the speaker or the conference will pay for it. But more often than not, what determines whether or not I go to a conference has to do with if I remember to send in an abstract on time or not. That really has a lot to do with it. It's just so hard to remember and keep track of all these things because the timelines for some of these things are so different. So here's sort of the decision tree that I go through every year. I know that every January there is the American Association of Physics Teachers meeting, there's the American Astronomical Society Teachers meeting, there's the Association of Science Teacher Educators meeting, all occurring in January, sometimes on opposite coasts, sometimes on top of the same week. And so I usually try to figure out which of those three conferences I'm going to go to. But it depends kind of on whether or not I've sent an abstract in time. ASTE has a 6-month lead time, where AAS and AAPT only have 4-month lead times. So a lot of that has to do with where those things are and whether or not I've got anything in. In March, there's another series of conferences that I have to decide which I'm going to go to. The National Science Teachers Association Conference, the National Association of Research and Science Teaching, or the American Educational Research Association. Sometimes these things are together, sometimes they're apart. Traditionally, NARST, the National Association for Research and Science Teaching, has traditionally gone 1 year right adjacent to it and in the same city as NSTA, and an alternate years with AERA in a city adjacent to it right next to it. That's kind of broken down in recent years. NSTA was last week in San Antonio, and Jana was there for that. NARST was in Puerto Rico about 2 weeks ago, and AERA is in about 2 weeks from now, May 1st this particular year in San Francisco. So really spread all across the country. And it also depends on what you're interested in doing. NSTA is really a place you go to find out what's the latest, greatest equipment and what is a really cool series of lessons I can do on Monday morning. AERA, on the other hand, is where are all the hardcore researchers and where are they presenting their work. So they're very different sorts of conferences. But as Jana points out, NSTA has a 12-month lead time. So its meeting is next year in Boston in March, and I believe their abstracts are due any day now. Summer, every year, the American Astronomical Society of the Pacific has a meeting that I think about going to on education and public outreach, and that happens every year. And every third year, that conference specializes in Astro 101 teaching, a conference they call Cosmos in the Classroom. This year it's going to be in July in San Jose. So I can get there because I do know the way to San Jose. But summer is always a really tough time for many of us because summer we're usually in the middle of doing teacher workshops. So that's a hard time. Then in October and November of every year, that's when all the regional conferences are. NSTA has 4 regional conferences. Most states have a regional science teaching conference and a regional math teaching conference. Most of the professional societies have a regional conference then as well. The chemistry people have their regional conferences. The physics people have their regional conferences. So October and November, ton and ton of conferences. They're close enough you can drive to, so you can save a lot of money, but there's just so much going on. They all stand on top of each other. And then, of course, the granddaddy of them all, the AGU meeting, 20,000 people, the second week of December every year in San Francisco. 24 education sessions. The science is amazing. The education sessions are pretty good. I try to get to that conference as much as I can, except those of you that went to NSTA in San Francisco know San Francisco is one of the most expensive places on the planet to go to a conference. The registration for that meeting is $500. The hotel rooms are $200 a night. It's expensive to get in there. It's a tough, tough conference to make happen just because it's so darn expensive. Now, Heather mentions the Aztec conference, which is also in October. Aztec is for science museums and technology centers. A lot of planetarium folks are there. Another planetarium conference is the International Planetarium Society, which has an international conference every 2 years. The planetarium people also have regional conferences. I believe Kim Brandt's the incoming president for the Southeastern Planetarium Association. So planetarium conferences happen in the fall as well. IPS is in Beijing next year. Ooh, hey, that'll be a fun one. Let's see if we figure out how to get to Beijing. So this is kind of my annual contemplation. And so about a year in advance, I sort of sit here and I look at these things and say, where are they going to be, try to map out what I'm going to do. And I'd map it out in some pretty good detail and make some strong decisions about I'm not going to be able to do this, I'm not going to be able to do that. And then, like today, crazy stuff happens. So today, I was talking with Stephanie, and Stephanie and I were looking at the American Association for the Advancement of Science Conference, and we said, you know what, we really need to go to that. That's not even on the list. And it turns out that's a pretty good conference. So I tend to be pretty flexible about these things. You really should try to find a way to get to one professional conference a year, even if it has to come out of your own pocket. Because at these professional conferences, that's where people are giving talks about papers that won't be published for 18 more months. It's where a chance to meet people for research collaborations, for committee assignments, for people to write you external letters of review. Really, really an important part of this. All right. So what are you going to do when you go to these conferences? Well, turns out there's a bit of a hierarchy. You could just go to the conference and listen. And yes, you could, but that's not really participating in the conference. You could interview for jobs while you're at a conference, and that's a really good idea. You get practice at interviewing for jobs. You get to feel for what kind of jobs are out there. You should always have your resumes dusted off and ready to have with you because you never know who's hiring and not advertising. You probably should participate in a workshop. Often it means going your day or two early, which can be really complicated when it comes to childcare. But workshops are a way you get to spend half a day with the workshop presenters, and you get to meet people that are sitting at your table that you get to work alongside. One way to reduce your cost is to volunteer. You can work in a booth, or you can work at the registration desk for a few hours. And that's a good way to get a reduced or even free registration rate. And it's a way to see lots and lots of people. I tend to spend a lot of time in the exhibit hall. I tend to spend a lot of time standing near my various book publishers because it gives me a chance to see lots of people as they drift by. So that's a really good way to do that. Presenting a poster is a low-stress way of presenting the kinds of things you're working on, because if you get nervous and you feel like you don't want to talk to anyone else, you can always just leave, but your poster is still there. People you get to talk to people on your own speed. Most people come up and they're looking at your poster and they'll look at it for a little while, and then they'll say, "Hey, could you tell me about this?" And it gives you a chance to interact with people at the level of depth that you want to practice getting to talk to people. You can certainly present a paper or a talk, but again, at places like AAS, you get 6 minutes, really, really fast. Some places are longer, like AAPT, you get 10 to 12 minutes. If you're giving a session at AGU, often you get 20 or 30 minutes. That's still not very, very long to give a talk. Again, you can organize a panel, organize a session. That's a fantastic thing to do because it gives you a chance to interact with people that are leaders in their field that you'd like to have come talk. It gives you an excuse to call them on the phone, excuse to send an email with them, excuse to have coffee with them and planning. It's a good way to meet people. And then another way to serve these professional societies is to serve on one of their many committees. For years and years, I've served on the NARST Dissertation Award Committee. I've served on Best Paper presenting committees. I've served on a number of committees that allow me to get to meet more people that are in the organization, spend more time with them. I tend to not do things like volunteer to be a judge for student presentations because I don't get to often talk to those folks very long. If you're doing student presentations, it's a lot like grading a science fair. You got to look at 50 projects in 50 minutes, and that doesn't often work very well. But getting yourself serving on committees is important. If you can serve as an officer like Kim Brandt does and Sean Latch does, those are ways to get to know even more people as part of a society. But again, you got to know your organization that you're working for and know how long these lead times are in terms of getting yourself involved and making your proposals for that. Now, we should spend a little bit of time talking about how to pay for it. As I mentioned before, it's important that you go to at least one conference a year. And sometimes you just got to pay for it out of your own pocket. So there are a number of ways to make it as cheap as possible. One is to pay attention geographically. NSTA sweeps by close to your hometown once every 4 years. So that's one way to get to that. Another strategy is to share a hotel room. For me, the hotel room is the most expensive part of these conferences, particularly if you stay in the conference hotel. Sometimes right next door to the conference hotel there's a Best Western or a Hampton Inn, which can be half the price. Often the lower price hotels also have free breakfast. The lower price hotels often have free internet because people that go to the 5-star hotels often have budgets to go ahead and pay for their internet, pay for their parking, and to pay for their breakfasts. So often you get a better deal both food-wise and price-wise if you can find a cheaper hotel that's right next door. But as Heather mentioned, if you're in a place where you're going to have to walk very far and you're going to stay at the late-night sessions, it can be a real problem. So think about that. But sharing a room is a really, really great way to cut down costs. Registration at some of these meetings can be extremely expensive. If you are a member of that society, often you get a big discount break. But if your university is paying for your trip, they will not pay for your membership. So some people will not join an organization and go ahead and pay for the higher cost registration because their university doesn't reimburse them for the cost of a membership. If you register early, you get an early bird rate. If you are a student, you should definitely get the student rate. Sometimes your professor will need to write a letter for you or respond to an email to get you the student rate, and you should definitely do that. It's totally worth it. And again, if you volunteer at a booth for a vendor or volunteer at the society for a working registration table, for instance, often you'll get reduced or free registration for that. And probably the killer is food. Food in a place like San Francisco, Washington, D.C. will kill you. So plan meals carefully. In particular, anytime you can eat free food at a reception, go for that. Eating in your conference hotel will just be a killer. But if you walk it next to 7-Eleven, you can pick up some stuff there. I tend to eat Subway sandwiches a lot when I'm going conference travel just to save money. Because if you end up going out to dinner with people, it really, really get you. So be very careful about how you plan meals. Let me pause here and ask for folks about suggestions, other things they can think of ways to save money at these conferences.
If you're just a student at Miami or at Laramie, are you considered a government employee?
Yes and no. Depends. There's state government employees and federal government employees. But to be completely honest, in all of my travels, and I stay at hotels about 60 nights a year, only once in 5 years has somebody asked me or questioned me about government rates. So if you reserve your hotel by going to the hotel website like Hilton.com or HolidayInn.com, you can click the button that says government rate, and you can get the government rate, and no one ever asks me for, has ever asked, except for once in my entire life, ever asked me for an ID to say I was had a government. I was working with the government. So I always, when I can, get the government rate. Now, in general, hotels don't have very many rooms set aside for the government rate, so if you're reserving early, you can get that government rate. And worst case thing that can happen if you don't have a government ID card, they'll give it to you anyway. The only place I've ever been hassled was I actually had a hotel room in Laramie for reasons that are hard to understand. And Laramie, the room was being paid for by the University of Wyoming. I guess I should explain, or you're going to connect weird dots. We were hosting a conference at the Hilton in Laramie, Wyoming. And so I stayed there in the Hilton as part of the conference, so I could be there and manage stuff. And the Hilton there questioned my state government status, even though my room was being directly billed to the university. That's the only time it's ever happened. But yeah, I always try to get the government rate. Never had anyone check my ID. Often AARP or AAA has discount memberships rates. I've never tried it. I don't know if you check that box and try to get the AAA rate if they ever ask for your ID card or not. I don't know how that works. So, yeah, government rate is a good way to go. Usually the conference rate is not that cheap. Sometimes you can get better deals on hotels.com, for instance. Other questions or thoughts? That was a good one, Debbie.
I was just going to say I liked Katie's idea about bringing food with you to the conference. You know, if you can bring it, you know, to save money on meal costs and things like that.
When I'm traveling Southwest, I often will take an extra suitcase full of food. So I often have my kids traveling with me too. So yeah, taking food with you or figuring out where the nearest grocery store or nearest 7-Eleven is can really help cut down on your costs. And staying at a hotel that gives you free breakfast. If you stay at Embassy Suites, not only does Embassy Suites always give you 2 rooms and a free breakfast, but in the evening they have what they call manager's reception from 5 to 7, and they often have free beer and sometimes pretty serious hors d'oeuvres. Sometimes it's just potato chips. So Embassy Suites for evenings. Homewood Suites in the evenings, Monday through Thursday, also provides dinner. Any other suggestions about how to save money? I don't think your microphone's working. You sound like you're a long way away, so maybe it's set to your computer mic. I don't know what just happened.
How's that? Is that better? Okay. Yeah, because I got it froze up, so I had to log back in, and apparently it forgot my new setting.
So anyway, I was just saying live near San Francisco so you can drive to AGU and not pay for a hotel.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Okay. Now, additional pathways about paying for it. Sometimes your university, your institution will help pay for your travel. But often it's very complicated, takes some time to figure out. But almost always they will only pay for your travel if you are presenting a poster or a presentation. So you need to get in the habit of always having something to present. Sometimes they'll just pay for half. Sometimes one department will give you $250 and the college dean will give you $250 and the university will give you $250, and you can begin to add up and get money. But rarely do you ever get the money in advance. Usually you have to go, come back to get reimbursed and bring all your receipts, and then wait a month or 6 weeks to get reimbursed. I should also mention, if you're the kind of person that just loves to travel, if you can match conference travel with vacations, that helps a bunch. And I always recommend going early if you want to go see the sites, because at the end of the conference you're just really, really tired. I've tried it several times. It just never seems to work out. But again, if you really go work the conference and you do the talks and you do the poster sessions, you do the exhibit hall, and you go with the intention of meeting people and interacting with people, you're going to come out way, way ahead, even if you have to pay for it yourself. All right, so we're getting close to the end of our time here, but I suspect you have some other insights or some questions related to conference travel and how to get into the conference and how to make it work for you. So what kind of other thoughts or questions do you have we can share for each other?
Tim, I've got a question. What if you're definitely the bottom rung on the totem pole going to a conference? Like I'm going to the Mars Summit conference in a couple of weeks. People, well, as you saw, people like Charlie Bolden and Buzz Aldrin are going to be there. And I'm definitely the lowest guy in the room. How do I get the network going on in that situation?
For me, the name tag strategy is the way to go and trying to figure out what to talk to people about, no matter where you are in the totem pole, because use that as people have names, their name tags, they'll have stickers, they'll have buttons on their lanyard. Using name tags is totally the way to go. Some people are very, very easy to talk to. In fact, some of you have seen the picture from this fall of Stephanie and Buzz Aldrin. Just really, really easy to talk to. Usually while they're at a conference, they're there talking about something or doing something. And if you can get them to talk about what they're working on, that is a great way, because they'll just start talking and keep going and keep going. If you can keep the conversation about them, the conversation will tend to go much better than if you try to tell them what kinds of things you're working on. Sometimes these conferences, like the Mars thing, will have sit-down dinners or sit-down hors d'oeuvres, and whoever you're sitting next to often is a great place to start a conversation as well. So you get yourself in a situation where you're sitting down. That usually works pretty well. Oh, and Mark Reiser has always mentioned having a wingman is a pretty good idea as well. You can kind of scan the audience and see people standing by themselves, and you can usually say, you know what, that person's standing by themselves, I bet they haven't figured out how to talk to anybody, and you can go practice on them. Again, volunteering at a booth or the registration table, and Ken, this in your case particularly, if you were to volunteer someplace there, that would get you standing next to other people, that would help you get to know other people as well. You can always ask for an introduction. Some people say, what should I call Charlie Bolden or Buzz Aldrin? Should I say, hey, Buzz, or should I say, hey, Dr. Aldrin? And there are different opinions about this. My opinion is that anybody who you don't know, if you've not met before, you should call them by their formal name, Dr. Aldrin, Dr. Bolden, until they tell you otherwise. Now, other people say, that sets up a hierarchy. You should immediately go up to them and shake their hand and say, hey, Buzz, how you doing? I don't share that opinion. I think you should be very formal with people until they tell you otherwise. I wouldn't introduce yourself as Dr. Jones. I would you say, hello, Dr. Aldrin, my name is Tim. And if you say when you introduce yourself, hello, my name is Tim, if you can give them a 5-word description of yourself, then that makes the connection and they'll be able to ask you, hi, Dr. Aldrin, my name is Tim. I'm here because I'm sharing my work having to do with rocks. And maybe they'll ask you about it. Or maybe they'll just say, nice to meet you, and walk on.